Yeah, absolutely incredible. I think that, watching it, I went from sort of agony to ecstasy inside sort of a minute thinking, oh, how have they thrown this away? Obviously, Wolves did really well, particularly in that second half, but being 2 goals in front twice. But I have to say that I was part of those games when I played where you're giving a goal away at one end, but somehow one of your special players would turn up and do something remarkable. And the goal last night was sensational from Mainoo. I think that we've obviously seen different types of goals, but for him to keep such composure, slot it through the lad's legs, I mean, that bit there is just absolutely wonderful. And the finish is, he's a fantastic player. Look, I think to come into Manchester United's team at any time is really difficult. And he's coming at one of the most difficult times in the club's recent history. Yet he's just stood out as being someone whose temperament, composure is off the scale, and looks like he's got the world at his feet for the next 10 years. But, there's been an example in the last week or two whereby you can sometimes get carried away. Obviously, Marcus Rashord had the same, and he scored last night, which obviously is a good thing for him and a good thing for the club that thing's been put behind them. But there's, he's got 15 years left, Kobbie Mainoo, and he's got to keep his feet on the ground, but looks like he's got all the attributes that you would need to be a top player.
Yes, so exciting, isn't it, to see someone just 18 years old playing like that and having that sort of impact. You mentioned Marcus Rashord. We have got to ask you about him after this well-documented disciplinary issue this week. Scoring inside 5 minutes is kind of the best response. Was that the reaction you expected? Does that justify Erik ten Hag starting him in the face of all these issues that they've had?
Yeah, I mean, look, I had 2 fears after sort of the story broke at the weekend. One was that it would drag on for months and months, and that we'd have a Jadon Sancho situation. There would be a standoff. And secondly, that, is Marcus Rashford okay? What's going on? This is a couple of times now it's happened recently. And I have to say, the first one we can put to bed, because it would seem that there's no doubt that scoring a goal and playing in the game, Erik ten Hag and Marcus Rashord have put it to bed. The second one, which is around Marcus Rashford himself, he has to make sure now that he's faultless to the end of the season, and that he uses that goal, that feeling of going celebrating with those, his colleagues and the fans over on that side at Wolves last night, can enable him to sort of just refocus and reset.
Gary, thanks for that. Just obviously going to ask you about deadline day as well. We know you're a man that knows your football inside out, but knows your finances as well. It's always the busiest day of the year here for us, your Sky Sports News. I was in the gym at 10 o'clock, mate, on the treadmill at 10 a.m. I mean, it was a strange old day in a strange old window. What have you made of it?
Well, yesterday we maybe got the window that we've always probably talked about in the football community. We've always said, whether it be managers, whether it be us, whether it be players, January is the most difficult time to do business. January is a time where you don't get value for money. January is a time whereby you sort of panic buy, so you shouldn't do, too much in this window. And yesterday we got the window we've always talked about. I think probably the odd thing is that last year, when you're nearly spending £900 million in a January window, it goes against everything that we say as sort of analysts of the game, because we always talk about those difficulties and challenges. There's no doubt that COVID is maybe catching up with clubs. I think the threat now of real punishment and the Premier League stamping down on the sort of FFP element. Obviously, Everton have been the first club to be punished. There are others, obviously, that maybe are being lined up, including Everton again. And I think there is a lot of caution. In the past, maybe, I think, where clubs are over that 3-year, £105 million sustainability threshold, they've thought, well, maybe we can get players out. And then what's caught Everton out is they've not been able to get enough players out to be able to come back within the threshold, which means they then get deducted 10 points. So maybe there's just a lot more caution, being a lot more sensible. I don't think it's a bad thing. I know that maybe yesterday, fans that love transfer deadline day, and obviously at Sky Sports News, it's a big day for us as in terms of sort of just the excitement of it. But actually, maybe in terms of the club, the sort of the future of the game and sort of sensible clubs doing sensible business, maybe it was the start of something that means that we're going to see a bit more sustainability and smartness in this window moving forward.
Yeah. Do you think that'll hold true just for the January window, or do you expect to see this sort of trend continuing into the summer, and will we see, perhaps a slower transfer market come this summer, or maybe prices for players just coming down that little bit?
Yeah, I don't think that would be a bad thing. I would expect the summer will explode again. I don't think that we'll see, it may come down slightly. But you've got to remember the TV money, obviously, that we're part of, and the global TV money is still the same as it was. So the cash is still going into the clubs. So the money's there that's always been there, if not more. So I don't think it's a case of the clubs haven't got the money. I think it's maybe a case of maybe COVID and the losses catching up with them, maybe a slightly new approach and thinking about sort of things in a little bit more of a measured fashion. But I think the main thing might be that FFP seems to be sort of hitting, I know Manchester United, a club that you would argue sort of spent hundreds of millions, and I've spent hundreds of millions. I know they're on the edge of FFP. It's not just the likes of Everton maybe and Notts Forest who are nearer the bottom of the league at this moment in time, trying to play catch up. It's the clubs right at the very top who are having to just move forward with a little bit more sort of caution.
We heard David Moyes saying as well, Gary, he didn't think there should be matches on deadline day. They were trying to get a couple of players out, Ben Rama and Pablo Fornals, etc. But there was some question that they didn't get the paperwork done in time. And Moyes saying afterwards, well, there's matches on. We're so busy, it's difficult to sort of do everything we need to do from a transfer point of view. Do you think the Premier League need to look at that and maybe move matches away from the end of the transfer windows as well?
Yeah, it's not the first time this has happened. I do have some sympathy, having been at obviously a lot lower level on a club like Salford on transfer deadline day, where the manager is a big part of that day. The manager's liaison with the sporting director, with the owner, or with the CEO is critical, because you don't obviously do business on transfer deadline day or at any time without going through the manager and making sure the manager's abreast of all the sort of things that are happening. So for David Moyes to have a game and then be asked to be sort of, if you like, thrust upon what will be transfer news on a regular basis, and actually even last night will have been actually, on the touchline for a match, I don't think it's ideal. I don't think it's a case of sort of jumping up and down about it, but I think it's something that the Premier League in future should just avoid, because I do have some sympathy for the managers who were last night obviously on the bench preparing for a game all day and were having to be called up, text, pass messages via sort of probably other sources that were in the dressing room to tell them that maybe some players that were leaving. And we always look at maybe the big players that are leaving and the big players that are coming in, but it's not just that. A manager like David Moyes will pay real attention to detail for all transactions in the club, and that'll be under 23 players, that'll be youth players. You want to be across things. So there's a lot of loan moves that happened last night. In fact, we at Salford took a player from West Ham on transfer deadline day, and I'm sure David Moyes would have been across that. And maybe the moves on that were made a day or so before, but still, he will have been told that deal's now gone through. It went through, I think, last night, sort of early evening or probably during the game that West Ham were playing. So I do have some sympathy for him, and I think it's something that should be potentially avoided in the future.
Yeah, there's only so many things everyone can keep an eye on at once, right? We are all human. With the window now closed, I mean, it was a quiet one, it really was. But is there anyone that you think has had a particularly good or bad window? And with there being such little movement or so few signings, can you see it having much of an impact, particularly for maybe the clubs lower down in the relegation battles?
Just sometimes I always think that we can say it's a bad window when clubs don't sign players, but actually I think sometimes it can be a good window when you actually don't have any players leave your club, and you can actually have stability. And sometimes actually players coming in January can just upset things anyway and sort of destabilise the dressing room. Arsenal's been one of the main talking points over the last few months that they need to bring in a striker. I think I've said it myself, that at the top of the league, it's pretty obvious that there are games that you've watched Arsenal in and they've played in, that everyone sees the fact they need that number 9 who can score those goals for them. For all their inventive, great football, they just don't punish teams enough. But if that player is not available, or if the player that is available is a huge price, that means that they're going to have to go and sort of blow the wage bill or something like that, then I think that it's sensible that the clubs haven't done business. So, I understand there are sort of difficulties and sort of a feeling that clubs have maybe under-delivered or under-achieved in this transfer window and needed to bring more players in, but actually keeping the players that you have is important, and not panicking and not bringing in players over the odds that mean that you create a problem down the line.